Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. After its sweeping victory in Uttar Pradesh, there are serious concerns about three BJP manifesto commitments. Could the promise to waive all farm loans and ensure future loans are interest-free seriously damage the state exchequer? Could the promise to ban mechanized slaughterhouses endanger thousands of jobs and cripple India's meat exports, which grow at 30% a year? And with many believing the commitment to build the Ram Mandir has got a big boost, does the government need to restrain its supporters and lower their expectations? Those are three key issues we shall discuss tonight. My guests are former BJP MP and editor of The Pioneer, Chandan Mitra; Congress's former Minister of Information and Broadcasting, Manish Tiwari; the former Secretary General of FICCI, one of India's most highly regarded economists, Rajiv Kumar; the well-known Lucknow-based journalist Sharad Pradhan; and the editorial director of the Business Standard, A.K. Bhattacharya. Mr. Bhattacharya, let's start with economic issues before we come to emotional ones. First, the BJP has promised that all farm loans will be waived, and secondly, farmers will get further loans at 0% interest. Now, the State Bank of India has estimated that the cost of writing off farm loans could be 27,420 crore, which is, I believe, 8% of UP's revenues. Can the state afford this, or would it be a reckless step to take?
Let me state at the outset, Mr. Thapar, that debt waivers of a generic nature, such as the one that has been promised in the BJP's poll manifesto for Uttar Pradesh, can be fiscally irresponsible and economically very damaging for the state's economy. I will explain to you in brief why. You mentioned the SBI's figures of what will be the cost of the debt waiver. I think this is a gross understatement, because if you look at the figure of 75,000 crore of total outstanding loans to the farming community in Uttar Pradesh, and if you extrapolate the national figure of 12.6 lakh crore of farm loan outstanding, and you get a figure of around 56,000 crore loan outstanding for commercial banks, and the remaining 8,000 crore and another 11,000 crore for the regional rural banks and the state cooperative banks respectively. Now, if the commercial bank sector, which the SBI study was denoting, is going to take the hit, then the actual impact will be not just 27,000 crore, it will be closer to 56,000 crore if 75,000 crore figure, which is a 2-year-old figure, is correct. Now, to expect that the commercial banking sector will take such a hit is clearly is completely unreasonable. So therefore, the state exchequer will have to come in, and if you look at the UP government's finances, they are in dire strait. Just to give you a figure, that the total fiscal deficit of the Uttar Pradesh government last year was around 55,000 crore. Now, then imagine if the state government wants to take the hit on its own books, even if you take it over a period of 2 years or 3 years, almost 50% of the fiscal deficit, if it is a 2-year period, will be wiped out, or the burden will be added to its fisc. Now, therefore, fiscally it will be responsible. Economically, why I am saying is damaging for the economy is because you are not only promising debt waiver, but you are also promising that future loans to the farmers will be offered at 0 interest rate. Now, this will seriously undermine and damage credit recovery climate. People, and if it is crop loan, if somebody is taking loan for growing a crop, then I would imagine that the farmer is going to the market and selling that crop. So the logic of giving the interest waiver for future loans is completely out of the unreasonable. So that in brief is the situation.
Rajiv Kumar, you've heard a very, very strong answer from A.K. Bhattacharya, the editorial director of the Business Standard. Let me put his answer into the context of some of UP's economic facts. The state fiscal deficit is 5.85%, and it's more than doubled since 2013-2014. Secondly, UP has 17% of India's population, but only accounts for 7% of its GDP. Thirdly, UP's growth rate is one of the lowest of all India states. Its per capita income is half the national average, whilst its poverty rate is one of the worst in the country. given that background, what's your answer? Do you think in these circumstances the state should be waiving farmer loans?
Mr. Thapar, what you just described is the very unfortunate legacy that this new government has inherited, and this is very clear that UP is one of the most backward states in the country, and it is and the new economic policy will have to be framed in that particular context. About the farm loan waivers, let me first say that I just read through their manifesto called the Sankalp document. They have promised to waive off the loans only of the small and marginal farmers. And what Mr. Bhattacharya has quoted, which he also wrote in his article in Business Standard, is that all farm loans are equal to 75,000 crore. And I'm not sure whether this figure of 25,000 crore that the SBI has estimated is the amount of loan outstanding on the small and marginal farmer. Now, if that be the case, in the total, in the much broader context where you've got banking sector NPAs of more than 9 lakh crores, this is actually a very, very small amount. And if you look at the amount of, revenues outstanding on behalf of the farmers which have not been paid by the sugar mills, that's probably already about 9 or 10,000 crore. So, you know, the numbers seem very large, but when you put them in the context of, you know, the broader economy, they may not be that big.
Okay.
The second point that you made, and it was, you know, you said about the future loans. You know, all manifestos have a tendency for a hyperbole. The state government cannot by any means ensure that the future loans are at zero interest, because after all the loans will be extended by commercial banks. What in effect it would mean is that the farmers probably will not get any loan if this be the case, or the UP government will have to enter into an agreement with the commercial banks whereby they will give them whatever fiscal help is needed. And there,
yes,
I'm
but
afraid,
the second is the problem,
there are the conditions laid down by the 14th Finance Commission whereby they cannot extend their fiscal deficit if they have to receive the grants from the central government.
Okay.
No, so it is a bit more complicated, and let's not enter into scaremongering at the beginning.
Well, no, we're not. I think the word scaremongering is an unfortunate word. I don't think anyone is scaremongering, which is why I'm interrupting you. People are sharing their genuinely felt concerns. Let's not make it scaremongering, because whilst you're much more sanguine, Mr. Bhattacharya is much more concerned, but I don't think we should judgmentalize each other's positions. That wouldn't be right. But I want to take up with you, Sharad Pradhan, the fact that this is a commitment at any rate, even if Mr. Rajiv Kumar believes that it can't be fulfilled, to ensure that all future loans are at zero interest rate. This means that not only will it put a huge stress on banks, which at the end of the day the government may have to support them over, and therefore it will affect the state's fiscal deficit, but it also means that people will be encouraged to recklessly borrow even when they don't need it, because there's no cost to the borrowing. Doesn't that also then add a moral problem? A, you're inviting people to borrow when they don't need it, and B, after the waiver and with these new loans not carrying any interest, there's a real danger that people will expect future waivers as well. So on top of the economic burden, is there a moral reason why the BJP should reconsider this specific promise of free loans for the future?
Actually, you're absolutely right, because this is bound to create this kind of a situation where farmers would tend to go in for taking loans even when they don't need it, or they, for specifically, you know, often what happens here is that they need loan for not exactly for their farming. They need loan for their domestic needs, for instance social needs. For instance, the daughter is getting married or son is getting married, and they would use the money there, and obviously there is no return coming from there. So at the end of the day, they will tend to be complacent and not even care about returning, and they'll know that at the end of the day, once again they'll be able to go to the government of the day and seek fresh reprieve in this form. And this has happened in the past also. This has happened in the past also, when people generally have become complacent, because they know, in fact, all along during this election, the farmers down the line, they had been wondering.
Mr. Pradhan, you made that point very fully. There is therefore a very substantial moral hazard here, and is one that the BJP should be aware of. But the problem, Manish Tiwari, is that the farm loan waiver that your government implemented cost the country 70,000 crore and it sharply increased the fiscal deficit. So today, when the BJP has made a similar promise, are you in any position to advise them to reconsider? And you've heard good moral and you've heard good economic reasons why reconsideration should happen. But are you in a position to advise that? Or by the way, do you believe because you did it, this is perhaps a good idea for the BJP to do as well?
Well, Karan, if you were to rewind back to 2008 when the then UPA government decided to waive loans to farmers in the budget speech which was delivered by the finance minister, I think it was a good idea. You know, it gave farmers a fresh start. Everybody is entitled to a second start in life by wiping the state clean.
So is it a good start in UP too?
Of course, it had an impact on the fiscal deficit, but let's remember that between 2005 and 2008, the Indian economy was growing at a rate of about 9 to 9.5%. So therefore, there was enough headroom to be able to implement the loan waiver. And even in 2008, when the economic meltdown took place, the growth rate only came down to 6.7% and then went up again to in 2009 and 2010 to 9 and 9.5%. The question here is, does the state government have the means? Does it have the wherewithal to be able to walk the talk? Because eventually, if you've made a promise during an election campaign and you believe that people have voted for you as a consequence of that promise, then you are morally bound to implement that promise. See, either you shouldn't have made the promise, but now that you've made the promise in your manifesto, you obviously must have calculated the means. And so therefore you walk the talk.
All right, you've given a very clear answer. You're saying regardless of the fact the economy and the state economy in particular can't afford it, you have to walk the talk because you made the promise. But Chandan, I'm going to put the opposite to you. I know the BJP has won a massive mandate and therefore there is moral pressure on you to fulfill your manifesto promises. But if the economic reality of the state that you now rule conflicts with the promise you've made, surely in the interest of good governance and in the hope of development, you should either moderate the promise or reinterpret it. Don't you accept that logic?
I think that is that's a very cynical argument. Why should we assume that UP will continue to grow at this terrible rate at which it has been growing all these years? It is mainly due to misgovernance. With good governance, this rate, I am very confident, will go up double, treble, whatever. And in any case, agriculture in India has been growing at a very, very paltry rate. Mr. Manish Tiwari, I think, should look up the agricultural growth rate, not just the GDP growth rate. 1 to 4% maximum. Now, agriculture needs a fillip. And to get that fillip, farmers have to be got rid of the burden of loans that they have taken. And they have delivered. UP has had a very good harvest, and with this encouragement from the government, the loan waiver added with the 0% loan in future, I think this will propel the farmers to grow more food and become prosperous themselves and add to the prosperity of the state and the nation.
Now, Mr. Bhattacharya, of my panel guests today, you're the one who's very strongly and forcefully argued that in fact a waiver of this nature would be fiscally irresponsible and seriously damaging to the economy. In an article that you wrote for your paper, The Business Standard, on Monday, you therefore suggested 3 alternate options that the BJP could perhaps utilize instead of fulfilling the farm loan waiver in full. Briefly, would you sketch out what those options are?
Well, you know, what I said was that an electoral promise, after all, is an electoral promise, and the government probably in power now in Uttar Pradesh should not completely ignore that poll promise, but perhaps backload the fulfillment of the promise of waiving debts of the farmers. Now, backloading would mean the impact of those waiver would not be immediate economy, and it will be in a sense staggered over a period of time. So the more staggered it is, the adverse impact on the economy will be less. So that is point number one. And point number two would be this complete waiver of interest on all future loans probably should be, its coverage should be limited to only the few deserving cases, instead of it being a blanket zero rate interest for all farmers. And point number three, the Uttar Pradesh government, actually, I just briefly, there are four other very interesting proposals the manifesto has. One is 24/7 power, two is toilet for every household, three is gas connection for every household, and four is bus service connecting every village in UP. In my view, if the new government focuses on these four promises instead of waiving farm loans, probably the farmers would be more benefited by the fulfillment of these four promises rather than waiving their farm loans.
Chandan, before I go to anyone else, I'm going to come back to you to ask you this. Are you at all, or do you think the BJP at all would be amenable to those first two suggestions? A, stagger and backload the farm loan waiver so that A, the cost of it is not immediate, and B, it's staggered. And secondly, redefine the eligibility for farmers who get zero interest loans so that you limit the number who are eligible, thus limiting also its adverse impact. Just those two. Is that something you could consider in the interest of the UP economy? Quickly.
Look, I am nobody to consider. I'm sure that the UP government and the cabinet which has been formed today, they will definitely go into the actual implications of this, how much money will be needed by the state government, and accordingly devise a policy. But there is no going away from the promise. Farm loans will be waived and future loans will be at zero interest. That is not negotiable.
Except that the Cabinet will be open to considering ways of implementing, and one way of implementing is to minimize the cost by limiting the applicability or eligibility. Rajiv Kumar, let's come to a second promise made by the BJP, which many believe is also one that they need to reconsider. This time it's the promise to shut down all illegal slaughterhouses, but also to ban mechanized ones. Now, no one would deny that illegal slaughterhouses, which should never have existed in the first place, must be shut down. But mechanized ones operate A, with government permission, B, they employ thousands of people, C, they account for 60% of India's meat exports, which earn for the country over 26,000 crore and are increasing as an export item by nearly 30% annually. That being the case, is it wise or is it reckless to shut down mechanized slaughterhouses?
Yeah, Karan, just before I answer that, one very small point, which is that, let me repeat that zero interest rate debt is only for the small and marginal farmer, and I put that aside. On the mechanized slaughterhouses, of course it would be very reckless if all of them were to be shut down. I read the manifesto very carefully, and the word that is being used in Hindi is that they will be under pratibandh, which I understand to be regulation and regulatory provisions and strict regulatory provisions. So I am not sure whether this is coming out, where this is coming from, that all these mechanized houses will be will be shut down. I think what they will do is to regulate them carefully so that they don't, basically they abide by whatever regulations they have. Now, it is clear, and I think no government, because also, I mean, just as an aside, from what I'm told, there's a large number of BJP supporters and maybe even some of the BJP leadership which have taken this up as a part, as a part of their business activity. So I'm not sure at all whether the government intends to even shut down all these legal mechanized slaughterhouses. If they do, it will be reckless. But if they regulate them carefully, I think that's the thing to be done, because we do not want unregulated slaughtering, whether for exports or for the domestic market.
Your answer hinges critically on the interpretation of the word pratibandh, which you've interpreted to mean regulate. Others have interpreted it for me earlier today as ban.
I think that's
ban would be far more dangerous. Ban suggests shutting them down. Let me bring in Sharad Pradhan. Let's focus for a moment on what would be the impact for UP itself if the word pratibandh amounts to banning. First of all, there are 40 such legal slaughterhouses in the state. They probably provide, an estimate is something like between 20 and 30,000 jobs. And remember, these are very good quality jobs. And they earn for UP alone 7,000 crore. In the circumstances that UP is in today, can it afford that sort of hit?
Yeah, I'm sure it can't, and this is what, there is a lot of confusion among the BJP leaders here as well. I had spoken to some of them yesterday on this very issue, and they seem to be all confused because they were wondering why the mechanized slaughterhouses are being closed. Because even the Supreme Court order a couple of months back that came was only to close down slaughterhouses running illegally and being operated manually. So, and what they have done so far, there is no official order being issued by the government. What has happened yesterday, 2 slaughterhouses in Allahabad that were shut down was on account of some over enthusiastic local officials who wanted to gain brownie points, because the government is yet to issue a formal order in that. But since there is a Supreme Court order in place, I fail to understand how mechanized slaughterhouses can be closed, because they hold this, as you rightly pointed out, and they hold a license from the government of India.
Absolutely. However, I suppose the government does have a right after this mandate to actually close down things that it's committed itself to do. It's the advisability rather than the legality of that decision that I'm questioning. Before I come to my 2 politicians, I want to go quickly to Mr. Bhattacharya on this subject, and then I will come to both my politicians. We know, Mr. Bhattacharya, that UP is the biggest exporter of buffalo meat. Secondly, buffalo meat export is 1.56% of India's total exports, and that itself earns over 26,000 crore, and more importantly, that single export item is growing at 30% a year. Now, at a time when export or growth is only just picking up again after some 20 continuous months of falling, would a ban on mechanized slaughterhouses set back India's export growth and export targets just when we want to boost them?
Well, you know, the talks about whether it is pratibandh or regulation or ban, they are in the air. The impact on the activities of these abattoirs would definitely be negative. But I would imagine that you know, the UP government will have to take a clear, firm view, because the UP government will have to frame new laws or maybe issue an ordinance before any of these legal slaughterhouses will have to shut shop. So therefore, in the interim there will be uncertainty, and as you rightly said, that UP accounts for almost 50% of India's meat exports, and it's not it is not just export earnings, foreign exchange earnings, but it's also revenue for the various agencies, state agencies down the value chain. So therefore, I think this atmosphere of uncertainty over what kind of abattoirs you want to see in UP, whether they will be completely shut down or not, is not a positive development at all. Okay. On the contrary, sooner the new government clears the air and says what the policy is going to be, better will be for India's exports and UP's exports as well, and its livelihood and its many economic activities.
Now, Chandan Mitra, I readily concede that there is a fear that instead of buffaloes being killed in these mechanized slaughterhouses, cows could be killed. And I also concede that many of the BJP's members and voters believe that is a genuine fear. They believe it's happening. But surely that requires better policing to ensure the licenses of these mechanized slaughterhouses are not abused. It doesn't really call for closing down legal and economically beneficial operations. Policing is required, not shutting them down.
They don't say
well,
that.
Karan, to begin with, I think the government's intention is to stop all these illegal slaughterhouses where very, very unhygienic conditions prevail and where the animals are really tortured before they are finally slaughtered. So that has to stop, and the government has taken the right move in saying that illegal slaughterhouses will be closed down. if there is some people and police acting a little enthusiastically. I don't think that. But as far as a blanket ban on all mechanized abattoirs, I take the point that it could cause some economic loss. But mind you, by banning alcohol in the state, the Bihar government, and Bihar is a smaller state than UP, has lost 6,000 crore. And if they can absorb it, I think preservation of livestock is a far more nobler exercise than stopping people from drinking, which the Bihar government has done.
Can I just add? Can I just interrupt and add that actually the latest count suggests that the total number of buffaloes, and that's the animal we're talking about, has actually increased, not decreased in India. It's not a huge increase, but it has actually increased. That's a figure from the newspapers of August 2016.
But doesn't mean you go around killing them, na?
Well, you might as well give up eating meat altogether. We might as well then on that basis become vegetarian completely. Why kill chicken? Why kill fish? And what would Bengal do if fish were to suddenly be prohibited? After all, you could always argue that there's a shortage of fish in the sea. So, you know, that logic can be extended to the point at which you virtually give up eating. But let me bring in Manish Tiwari. Manish Tiwari, this is an issue of enormous emotional sensitivity to the Hindu majority of this country. It's therefore an issue on which, when your party speaks, you have to be very careful. And I want to ask you a simple question. Are you prepared to stand up for the right of legal, mechanized slaughterhouses to continue to operate, particularly because they earn money for the exchequer and important export money for the country? Are you prepared to stand up and fight for it? Or, because this is a sensitive issue, do you believe silence would be the better part of valor?
Well, Karan, I don't think that's the issue at stake. This is not an economic issue that you're dealing with. It's an ideological issue for the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. You know, when you have vegetarianism being made a compulsory part of school curricula in different parts of the country, and even for that matter, that revision has been suggested for the CBSE, that's the route that you are going down. So therefore, it's not a question of standing up for somebody's legal right to be able to earn his livelihood. If that right is impinged, you know, they have recourse to the courts of law, and I'm sure that the courts will uphold the rule of law. But you must understand that this government in Uttar Pradesh, from where is it coming?
But why can't I hear your voice upholding the rule of law? Why is the Congress spokesman not upholding the rule of law? You're happily leaving it to the courts to do so. You're the opposition. You should be standing up for these rights. Why is your voice not standing up for the right of legal, mechanized slaughterhouses to continue to function?
For the simple reason, Karan, there is absolutely no notification at this point in time. You do not react in the air. Spokespersons do not respond to speculative questionings and haranguing by anchors.
Manifesto.
You know, as and when there is a notification, we will peruse that notification and we'll come to an appropriate conclusion. May I remind you that the constitutional duty to uphold the rule of law is not of the opposition but of the courts of law.
Yes, but the duty to keep the government in check and ensure it doesn't abuse its powers and trespass over people's rights, that's a responsibility that you have. But you have a prerogative not to exercise it, or to stagger the exercise of it and to minimize the damage to your party, the consequence. That's your prerogative. Very quickly, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, I want to ask you a question, not of economics, but of principle. Do you believe there is a principle here, i.e. the right to continue with an economically viable legal enterprise, which is what mechanized slaughterhouses are? Or do you believe, despite the fact we're a secular country, on this issue, the sentiment of the majority can trump the principle? Which of the two?
No, absolutely there's the principle of upholding the legally viable permitted economic business activity in the country. There cannot be any other stand at all. And but please, and Karan, I think you should read that statement in the manifesto carefully. They use the word that all the illegal houses will be closed, band kar diye jayenge, and the legal mechanical slaughterhouses will be regulated. Unpe pratibandh lagega. So I do not see the UP government in any situation being flouting the the principle that you just mentioned, because that will infringe upon the freedom of individuals to do what they please and to undertake legally permissible economic activity.
Okay.
I can't see any state government doing so, and if they do so, then you and I should be in the forefront of opposing it.
All right. Yeah, I just hope that your interpretation of the word pratibandh is the correct one, that it is, in your opinion, only a matter of regulation, not as many others suspect, a matter of banning. Sharad Pradhan, let's now take up one of the most difficult emotional issues that the BJP will have to confront in UP. I'm talking of the Ram Mandir. With a government in Lucknow with a 4/5 majority, and a government in Delhi which for the first time after 30 years has an outright majority, many BJP supporters believe this is the time to push the Ram Mandir. First of all, as someone who is in UP, who understands UP, tell me, how strong is the pressure on the BJP to deliver on this issue?
Yeah, I don't think there is, other than their pressure from amongst their political class, I don't think there is pressure from the common people. For those who believe, who actually have a faith and who go there for the sake of faith, for them the temple under a tarpaulin is good enough. You see, thousands of people go there, and if you go to Ayodhya and talk to them, they say, even the local people who depend a lot on the pilgrimage that comes there, because of the pilgrimage, they will all tell you that we are happy with what is there, the makeshift temple. For them, it doesn't make any difference if it is a golden temple or a marble temple or a granite temple.
Okay.
It is not that pressure. It is these people, they feel that there's so much talk among the BJP hardcore Hindutva cadres that this is the time to go ahead with it, because probably never again with this, such a opportune moment may not come again.
Okay.
So that is what they are trying to. They are trying to themselves build up this thing and find some way. And I think even this the Supreme Court order has come in as not an order, I'm sorry, it's Supreme Court observation has come in as given a boost to this element.
Let me bring in Rajiv Kumar.
This is the time when we can go it.
Rajiv Kumar, it doesn't really matter whether the pressure is internal from within the BJP and its supporters or whether it's from the people itself. But there's no doubt that the BJP itself believes this is a moment when perhaps they should be pushing for the Ram Mandir. Now, my question is this. If the government in UP doesn't handle this pressure properly, could it have an impact on promises of development, good governance and economic growth? Are you worried that if they don't modulate this mood, don't restrain their supporters, there could be an impact on growth and governance and on development, which are the key promises they've made and which have brought them to power?
Yeah, I have no hesitation in saying that they should restrain their cadres and not go after this. There's an old Hindi saying that you can't worship God on empty stomachs, and therefore I am of the firm belief that whether it is Hindus, Muslims or whoever in the UP population, they want development far more than they want either the Ram temple or anything else. And I think Mr. Pradhan has put it very well. The religious sentiments are very well taken care of by what exists, and therefore this whole business about creating a grandiose structure, etc., has nothing to do either with religiosity or even with, or much less even with spirituality. So it will derail development, it will create tensions which are not needed in UP at this moment, and therefore I would also encourage central BJP leaders like Mr. Subramanian Swamy to desist from stoking this fire, and the UP government to not go down the route at all.
Now, Mr. Bhattacharya, UP is India's biggest state. The world has already noted the huge majority the BJP has won, and they've also noted the fact that the head of the Gorakhpur Mutt has become the chief minister. Now, if after all of that, the BJP fails to handle the upsurge of emotion around the Ram temple issue, and I'm not saying they will fail, but if they fail, what impact will that have on foreign investors? At a time when we really want to open our doors to foreign investment, and Mr. Modi is making it so much easier for them to come, would this upsurge of emotion worry them? Might it put them off going to UP specifically?
Well, if I have understood your question correctly, I think UP's population base has 19% of Muslims, and if a proper amicable solution is not found to this question, my sense is that the disquiet it might cause will be damaging for the state's economic welfare and the pace of economic activities. To some extent, the UP's economy will take a hit if there is disquiet over this issue. So therefore, any decision that is taken has to take into account that the 19% of the people of the state must be on board with whatever decision that is taken to resolve this very emotional and tricky issue.
Chandan Mitra, it's well known that the yogi is an enthusiastic supporter of the Ram Mandir. My question is, does he, at this moment of time, when the enthusiasm is perhaps so great, have the wisdom, and I don't mean to be rude when I ask that question, but does he have the wisdom, and more importantly, does he have the strength to restrain his own supporters and his colleagues on an issue where perhaps he agrees with them, rather than to encourage them, which could be the natural response he has? Does he have that strength and wisdom to restrain them?
Karan, you are not only jumping the gun, but you are continuing to kind of view Yogi Adityanath, who is a highly respected and popular political leader with a lot of administrative experience, as if he's a complete novice, a kid out of nowhere who has no idea of how to run things. I think this is a completely wrong reading of him and of the BJP as a party, which is now ruling in 14 states of the country. And I think, they are not stupid. They are not going to do anything which is very foolish. But let me put it very bluntly. No masjid exists there. Whatever existed was demolished in 92, and there is only a makeshift temple. The issue is whether a makeshift temple where Ram Lalla is placed under tents will be made into a permanent structure or not. And the party's position is clear. It is either by Supreme Court order or through an amicable settlement, which is what the Supreme Court suggested yesterday, that something will be done. I think till then, anybody who has sworn to uphold the Constitution of India, whether it's the government of India or the government of UP, will have to go by whatever the Supreme Court has suggested, and we hope that the temple will be built. I believe it must be built, but only through amicable negotiations.
Prima facie, what you just heard, Manish Tiwari, from Chandan Mitra ought to be hugely reassuring. Do you accept prima facie what he said? Do you share his confidence in what he called the yogi's enormous administrative experience, although as far as I know the yogi has none, but let that be aside. Do you accept the reassuring words from Chandan, or are you more skeptical?
He's administered a huge mutt.
Well, Chandan Mitra started off with 1992, and may I remind Mr. Chandan Mitra that the BJP Chief Minister at that point in time, Mr. Kalyan Singh, gave a solemn assurance to the Supreme Court that the Babri Masjid would not be demolished. He was held in contempt by the Supreme Court and sentenced to a day's imprisonment. So therefore, that is their track record in terms of upholding the Constitution. Look, Karan, this is a poisoned chalice. There is no popular sentiment around it, but this is the template of polarization which the BJP is going to pursue over the next 2 years in order to cover all the economic follies that they have committed in the past 3 years. So you are heading into an era of hyper polarization. I just hope that this offer which the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has made, he's also held himself out as a mediator. The government takes it seriously, and if at all any modus vivendi has to be found, that modus vivendi is found through an amicable settlement, because I disagree with Chandan. It is not only a question that the masjid is gone and therefore a makeshift temple has to be made into a bigger temple. There is a pending list with regard to the ownership of that land. So therefore, there are complex legal issues in addition to emotive issues involved. And I think the Chief Justice has acted with a lot of sagacity when he suggested that there should be negotiations among the parties, and even gone to the extent of holding himself
but this
out
is not about
to
the
be
Chief
a
Justice.
mediator among them.
Very quickly, before I give Chandan the last word. It's only fair that on this issue where his party's position is under such question, he should have the last word. I want to ask you one question, Sharad Pradhan, and I want to ask you for a very short answer. Do you have any sense of how the yogi will behave on this issue? Any sense at all, or is it almost impossible to tell?
Well, on the 11th itself, when I was sitting in your studios in Delhi, I had asked him this question after their huge victory, and he gave a very wishy-washy reply, and he was not in his aggressive self. He said, no, we'll go by the constitutional process, we'll follow that. You know, the problem lies in him controlling his lumpen element. He has a huge, this Hindu Yuva Vahini, which is very belligerent and which can create a lot of problems for him.
Let me I'm stopping you because I'm running out of time. You've explained what you believe is the problem. Okay. Chandan, can he control what is described as his lumpen element? Can he control the Yuva Vahini?
No, Yuva Vahini he can fully control. He did that. First they had said they will put up candidates against the BJP. They withdrew on his word, and Yogi Adityanath is not going to act in an individual capacity. He acts as a BJP chief minister. Obviously, any decision he takes or any action he undertakes will be in consultation with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Party President Amit Shah, and other senior leaders of the BJP. So I don't think that you should worry at all. I mean, UP will be peaceful. Yes, the Mandir, as I'm telling you, has to be built. It will be built, but it will be built legally with full under constitutional guarantees.
Your confidence is well placed rather
the
than misplaced, because a lot of the future of UP and indeed our country could depend on that confidence you're giving us. My thanks to all my guests for joining me, and if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.